that they use to explain today's Gemara, but I don't know this.
Sorry, Akiva, are you talking to me?
No, I was the Yosy. Couldn't hear me?
Do you hear us, Yosy?
Okay, here we go.
I guess
No, he
doesn't.
doesn't. I guess he doesn't.
My mic is crossed on the corners. Okay, so Rabbi Huda.
You
Oh, you cannot
forgot.
hear?
No, we hear you don't hear us. You don't hear us.
Check my audio here.
We hear you. You don't hear us.
I see. Oh,
Oh, forgot to turn on the anchor. Oh, I'm sorry. I was spacing out.
Hear us now?
he's got to turn on the. You just got to turn on his audio setting, his speaker. Did he freeze?
Think. Okay. I'm getting feedback over here.
Yes, is that clear?
Yeah, but I'm getting something.
No, he hears us. Okay. You hear us.
Yes. So I took a guess if this was the marbleized steak Gemara. No, the malachim you said were being.
It's even better than that.
Okay.
Okay.
It can be better than that? Okay.
Listen, this is a marbleized steak wouldn't be so hard how the fats you would be able to show in a video. This is a little bit more difficult. Right? Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Shader like Korbana. Rabbi Yehuda decided to send the gift to turn over on today's daf to Avid Rana. To Avid Rana B'Yom Edom. So Avid Rana was his friend. That was the name of the person that Rabbi Yehuda wanted to send a gift to, but he was giving him a gift on today's Avoda Zara, which we learned right at the beginning of Masechta is not allowed. Amar, Rabbi Yehuda justified it by explaining, Yodana Beid lepalach lavon shkachavim. My guy doesn't serve Avoda Zara. So he's not going to say, oh, thank you, Getchkele, for making Rabbi Yehuda give me this gift. Amar Rabbi Yosef, is that enough? Because you know he doesn't do Avoda Zara. So now he's exempt from the rules of Avoda Zara. But Tanya, we learned, Ezeu ger toishev kol shekibul alav b'fnei gimel chaverim shaloi la'avod avodas kachavim. He might not do Avoda Zara, but you don't qualify to be a ger toishev unless you accept it and pronounce it loud in front of 3 people. So he's still a guy. Zok Rabbi Yehuda ki Tanya hahi lachiyosai. That brisa that says what defines a ger toishev, that's for the purposes of helping him, of being mechazik him. I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to do this to my friend Avidrana. All I'm doing is sending him a gift. That you're allowed to do even if he's not a ger toishev. Break the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar B'Yochanan ger toishev she'avrul of Yud Beis Chodesh v'loy mol. If a ger toishev is already a ger toishev for 12 months and he wasn't mal, he didn't become a Jew. Harehu kamin shebayv tikachavim. He is like a min of tikachavim because the fact that he didn't take on Yiddishkeit completely shows that he's not sincere. Dr. Gemara, Hasam kagon shekibul olav lomo v'loymo. If he said, I want to be a ger toishev and stop there, then that's not a problem at all. Even if 12 months passed, there's no obligation for him to become Jewish and to mal. He's not a min. But if he said originally, I'm going to become a yid and I'm building up towards that, and I'm going to mal, and then he reneged on that, that's already a sign that he's not serious, and therefore he would not have the din anymore of a ger toishev. But I'll call upon giving a gift to a guy, he doesn't have to be a ger toishev to allow you to give him a gift b'yom edom. As long as you know that he's not going to be praising the getchke for the fact that he received this kindness. Okay, now this story, I recommend if you're at home, you mute it. because this story is for men only who learn Gemara. Rava amti le kurbana lebar shishach. Rava brought a gift to Bar Shishach, who was his friend. He wanted to make sure he's well greased. And on again the day of the Avoda Zara. And Omar, he said, I know that he doesn't do Avoda Zara, so there's no concern of buying him a gift. So Azal he went around the back. I guess the guy was in the backyard. He was sitting in the hot tub up to his neck, and there was rose petals all over the water. So he was taking a bath. He was relaxing. He was karachatzing zechos in a mikveh that was rose flavored, rose smelling. It was beautiful. But the kaimen zoynos arumas kamei, and he was surrounded with zoynos arumos. No need to get into the details. That's living the life. Amr Lei, he told Rava, Islechu kehagavna la'amudasi. You Jews who are all into your Torah and your mitzvahs, because come on, this is living the life. You can't get better than this. Amr Lei, he told him back. I don't know how Rava walked in there when he saw him. I'm not sure. Maybe they covered up. I don't know exactly what happened. But Al Kalponim, he says, come on, even your other can't compare to this. Amr Lei, Rava says, the don adifa tvei. The pleasure that we're going to have in Olam Haba and Gan Eden is much better. Adifa tvei, it's not better, it's much better than what you think you call living a life. Overlay. So the guy said, how could that be? Tvei mehai miyavo. Better than this? What could be better? What could be better? Overlay, I'll tell you, Rava said, I'll tell you why we have it better. We'll have it better. Because atun ika alaychu emasad machusa. Yes, you're here in your backyard living the life with every taiva you could want. But the fact of the matter is, with the flip of a switch, the melech could summon you, and you'll have to do whatever he wants. In other words, you're not completely free. And now, on the other hand, when we're going to be ring and Eden, we're not going to be everything will be made in the shade for us. So it's zero's pressure. We all know you could be enjoying yourself in the most enjoyable fashion, but sometimes the stress of what your situation at large takes away from that pleasure. So Rava told him, you still have that underlying stress. When we'll be in Gan Eden, we'll have zero stress. I'm a big knacker. I'm a big fat knacker in the government. What worry do I have? Adi asked until they sat down. Osahu peristaka demalka. A messenger came from the king. Amalai, he said, come now. I don't know if he told him to get dressed first. The kaboylach malka. The king needs you. So he realized that he had to beck and call at the king. And right after Rava claimed this to him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu backed Rava up to demonstrate that precise fact, that he still has that stress over his head, that obligation to the king. So Kinavik Vazel, as he was leaving, he had to admit his defeat, that Rava was right. Amrullah, he said, anybody who's looking for bad to come upon Klal Yisrael, anybody who has bad intentions for Klal Yisrael, tipaka should be knocked out. As Rashi teaches, Ein hamisavel liros ra'aschem teoker. Sharei HaKadosh Baruch Hu mimalei kol tevaschem shav sichaschem mispareres. I could see HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mimalei all of your needs and pleasures. You know why? Because you merely said something, and right away HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a scenario to back it up. So Amalei Rava Amen. Rava said that's a beautiful bracha. All of a sudden Yisrael, their eyes get popped out. And you know what happened? Poke Eina de Vashishach. So he was officially Rava's friend. But you see that really in the back, he would have loved to stab Rava in the back. Amar Rav Papi said, Iboyle lemember mahaikra. Rava could have told Bar Shishach from a pasuk that we're going to have it much better. Because the pasuk says, I believe that, this is in Tillim, Benois melachim bikresecha. You know who's going to be serving every Yid? La'asid lavoi, not stamazoinus arumais, like Vashishach had, cheap tricks. Rather, Benois melachim, princes and princesses from all over the world, from the greatest kings of the highest caliber of society, they're the ones who are going to be around us and serving us. And nitzah shegel liminecha, your queen will be on your right side, bekesem oifer, dressed in the most beautiful jewelry. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rabbi could have said a different pasuk. Ayin le'rasa, the beauty of Gan Eden, a human eye cannot even comprehend it. Elakim zulascha yasa l'mechakale. The Rebbeinu Shalom alone has a hasaga of the tova that we're going to have in Gan Eden, and he will create that tova for someone who looks towards the Rebbeinu Shalom. Zok to Gemara weiter. Back to Avoda Zara. Sachrei lasos imay malach acheres. The Mishnah says, if you are hired specifically for working with Nayayin Esech, then your schar is aser. But if you were hired just to do general labor, and then during the day he said, move this barrel of Yayin Esech, then it won't be a problem. Zok to Gemara, it's mashma, it's not a problem at all. The afal gav deloy amr leili to se'eret. Even if he said this during the day, in the middle of his work, while his workday is still going on, and he did some of Avoda Zara work, he moved Yayin Esech around, even that would be mutter. Rabbi, I'm going to ask a kasha. If someone hires a poil, uli Tuesday Erev, and in the evening after he completed the tasks that he was hired for, Amr loy, the boss told him, Haver, then schare mutter, because he had already discharged his contract to do the work that he had to do. No Avoda Zara was involved. Now, as an extra, he did this. That won't make his schar oser. Time of the Amr Letusa Erev. From the Brisa, we can be medayik that the only way his schar is mutter is if this occurred, this work of Isser occurred after the day was over. But kula yom aloi, if during the day he did some work for the guy that was Isser Anah, it would taint his schar, and his schar would be oser, which is not the mashmois of our Mishnah. Amar Abaye kitna nami masnisin the Amar li tusei arev tanan. Let's amend our Mishnah, not actually make a change in girsa, but let's explain our Mishnah that our Mishnah is also only referring to a case where the barrel of Isser Anah, of Avoda Zara, of Yayin Esech, that this employee was asked to move, was at the end of the day after his work was discharged. Tanan, I'm sorry, Litus Erev Tanan, comma. Rava Amar, Rava said like kasha. It's not shver. Ha de Amar le haverli meya chaviyos the meya prutos. If I make a contract with the guy, you're going to move a bulk of 100 barrels, and the schar for all those 100 barrels is 100 prutos, which means until you completely move the 100 chaviyos, it's not yet triggered that he owes you the money. So there, if during the day one of the chaviyos that you move is Isur Anah, it will taint all of the payment for all of the barrels because it's one big contract, and in the contract was Isur Anah. However, our Mishnah is speaking, the Amrle Haverli Chavis Perputa. They just made a deal on piecework. For every Chavis you move, I'll pay you a Pruta. So that Chavis that he moved, that was just Anah during the day, so for that he won't take the Pruta, or he'll destroy the Pruta. But it doesn't taint all the other Prutas. So our Mishnah is speaking where he said Chavis per Pruta. And in fact, if he moved one barrel of Isur Anah during the day, in fact, he can't take that money, but he can take the other Prutas. But the Brisa that says that the whole schar is tainted, that's if it was one bulk deal. And therefore, until he moves all 100, he's not owed any money. Frank the Gemara, about Tanya we learned, that's a bulk deal. I'm sorry, it's not a kasha, but Tanya's b'nichusa, Rashi says. And you see a Brisa actually makes this distinction. But chavis per pruta, but nimtis chavis shayayin nesach b'nen, then it's chare mutter because each barrel is for itself. So Tosfos asks a very obvious kasha. How do Amr lehaverli kuf chaviyos bekuf prutos? Uvaha Asra Brisa. That's where the Brisa asers Kila Amr Leli Tuseir. The Chalkama the Loy Avrinu Lechulu until he finishes moving all 100 barrels. Lo Yayiv Lemidi. The employer doesn't owe him anything. The contract is to complete the full 100 barrels. Hilchach Kule Agra Shayach Bay. All of the payment hinges even on that 1 barrel of Isra No, Kein Lashon HaKudrus. That's how Rashi Luz Tosus is quoting from Rashi. Mashma from Rashi, Ha'omer Leli Tuse Erev, Mutter, the Aval Gav, Shima Oisem Chaviyot Sheis Nimoi. From Rashi would be Mashma, that even if the Chavos of Avoda Zara was one of the 100 Chaviyos, as long as that's the last one that he does, it wouldn't be a problem. For Ektosis, the Kasha. It's still one big bulk deal, and there's schar v'isra noyer. L'chaynir lefarish u'letusa erev means achar shehishlam kablanusay. He already moved 100 barrels, and he earned his schar free and clear. And then for the 101st barrel, Amr loy came. He said, "Move me another barrel." So the question is, why should there be any connection? Why should there be a problem? The Hashamina, the Chiddush is, Shafapi Shalai Asa Imai Tanai Chadash, Ella Alpi Tanai Arishanu Mavir Bepruta, Lifi Cheshbin Meya Bemeya Prutais. All he did was, let's continue the same deal, move me another barrel. So you might say that it's an extension of the original contract and not a standalone deal based on those same rates. It's like doing it on a separate day. It's a new contract. It's not connected to the earlier contract of 100 barrels for 100 frutos. So first we had a case of an employer who hires an employee to move yain nesach his schar is aser. And then we have a similar case with someone who hires a chamor, a transportation company, a shipping company, to move it for him. So the question is, why does the Mishnah have to give 2 examples of the same idea? That you're not allowed to work for Avodah Zarah, and if you do, your schar is also. There's a very important lesson that the Tana is imparting to us by telling us about a shipper. That is as follows. What if the contract of where the chamor driver was hired was just to allow him to sit on the animal so that he could go himself? So he wasn't using the chamor as a shipper, rather he was using him for his own transportation. Then which is the seifa of our Mishnah, if he didn't specifically hire him to ship the Avodah Zarah, to ship the flask of yain nezek, rather he hired it for himself, even though he brings it along with him, it's not a problem. Zok to Gemara, l'lememra the lagin lav dinahu li'asuve, and the Bach changed it to lav darke. Let me see if I can see that here. Lav darke, right. In other words, it's not the norm for a passenger to bring along a flask of wine. Right? That's what we'd have to say. Because since it's not the derech for him to bring along a flask of wine, when he hired this donkey driver to take him somewhere, the flask was not included in the contract. That he brings it along shouldn't have any impact on the chamor being able to take pay, because his pay is only for transporting the person. What if someone rents a chamor? So the question is, what type of luggage you think now the airlines limit you to 1 suitcase or 2 suitcases? In the olden days, they also had luggage limitations. So if you were hiring a chamor, the passenger, how much luggage is the passenger allowed to bring? He could put his kisus, which Tosfos says is not his beged, it means it's his mattress, and his flask of wine, and all of the food that he needs to sustain him for the entire trip until he reaches his destination. Even though they're going to stop off at many restaurants and rest areas along the way, the passenger has the right to bring all that with him. Mikan ve'elach, if he wants to bring more, chamor ma'akavalov. The airlines could say, no, We don't allow this extra luggage. What about the pilot and the stewardess? What are they allowed to bring along with them? He can put the feed that he'll need for the animal and his own feed, his own meals, just for one day. But he can't carry enough food. He can't pack a lunch bag for the whole trip. He'll have to stop off at a rest area and buy food at the overpriced restaurants along the way. The renter say, no, you're overloading the animal. So what do you see from here? You see from here that he could bring liginosai. So if a guy has a right to bring his liginosai, his flask of yayinesach onto the donkey, so when a guy rents his donkey service out to somebody, why is this charmuter? Part of the service includes carrying the yayinesach. Amar Abaye, nihita lagin dinahu li suve mia ulay maisavloy. If you have a ticket that entitles you to a check-in baggage and you don't check in, do you get as part of your fare refunded? Of course not. So it's the same thing over here. Yes, you're allowed to bring a flask of wine, but it's not money. It's not transferable to money because even if you didn't bring that, you won't get a discount. It's just a bonus. So therefore, the main schar is clearly not for carrying your flask of wine. The main schar is for carrying you. And all the other things are a bonus that are thrown in extra, they're not cash transferable. Let's think about this for a second. If it's easy to find food along the way, so why can't the owner of the chamor say, hey, I don't let you bring along all this extra food. It's a lot of extra weight. You'll buy along the way. And if you can't find food, well then how can the Seicha stop the chamor from bringing food? What is he supposed to do? Starve to death? Once a day, at the end of the day, they would be able to schlep around and find a place to eat. But it's a little bit inconvenient. So chamor, the donkey driver, that's his job. He's used to running around and finding food at his temporary stop. But Seicher, lav dache l'mitrich l'mizvah, he's going to bring along. Avoda of acha b'rei Ravika.
So Yosy, is the donkey and the people moving business, or they're freight forwarders that happen to also take people? How are we looking at them?
I think they do whatever they can make a buck with.
Oh, it doesn't matter if it's people or freight. It's just total weight.
That's right.
So even if it was somebody who was 300 pounds, they could say you're too big. They wouldn't take it. Forget the luggage.
So today they would get food for discrimination, but in those days, I'm sure that if the guy was too heavy, they would tell him to find another ride. The guy, you're so heavy and you still want to bring along food?
It's okay. He'll eat the donkey feed.
Avoda of Acha b'rei Ravika, the father of Acha b'rei Ravika, Hava, he was turning on Thomas base. Hava shofech luchamra la'ivdikachavim. This is how people who sold wine used to sell. What they used to do is included in the wine was the jug that it came with. So if you bought a jug of wine, not only did you get the wine, you got the jug that comes with it. Like when you go buy a soda in the store, the bottle comes with it. You don't have to bring your own bottle along. So that's how it was. However, the brother of Rav Acha b'rei Ravika sold wine in a slightly different fashion. What he would do is he would keep the jug and he would pour the wine over into the flask that was supplied by the guy. And he would keep the jug. Why would they let him keep the jug if every other wine merchant gives you the jug? Because of the next step. But what he would do is he would accompany them to cross the river, and he would pay their tolls and pay their transportation to cross the river. So that was an extra service that he provided to them, and therefore and as payment for him arranging for them the transportation to cross the river, he paid their bridge toll. That for that they gave him the jugs. That's why he kept the jugs. So also Abaye, they told Abaye what this man was doing and claiming that it's inappropriate because he's benefiting from the yayin esek. So Abaye said, Kika tarach beheter katarach. When he's pouring the wine in, he's pouring wine of heter. It becomes also when it goes into the keli of the goy, because the goy had yayin esek in his keli. That's no problem. That's no problem for the yid because he is not doing anything wrong. As Rashi says, Kika tarach lishbech b'didei katarach shayayin einin eser at shemagia la karkoyis shoziki didu. Until the wine hits the bottom of their flask, there's no problem here. So therefore, there's no problem. Now the Gemara is going to ask in a minute, what are you talking about? They had, after he poured it into their flasks, he then helps them pay the toll to get over the bridge. So what about that? The Gemara is going to get to there. But frankly, Gemara, we have another problem. By right to Bikiyumai, he needs that these flasks with yayin esach in them should not collapse. Because if Ali's pouring it, they collapse. You know what he's going to have to do? He's going to have to quickly give them the jugs to capture the wine that's leaking out of the flasks. So by right to Bikiyumai, he wants that these flasks with Israel on them should remain intact. The Lord Nitztaru Ziki, so they won't require his barrels. So Zok to Gemara, no, that's not the case here. The Masni Ba'adayu, he specifically told them, if your flasks leak, it's not my problem. I'm not giving you these barrels. So he had no need to be right to Bikiyumai, because from his perspective, even if the flasks ruptured and spilled the whole wine, he gets paid in full. It's not his problem. Inami, the Maisi Pristiki Ba'adayu, the guy brought with them spare jugs. So for sure, they wouldn't need the jugs that were supplied by Avua, the Rav Acha Barei Ravika. So there's no concern there. But for Gemara, you still have another problem. The Katarch Bisura, he's directly helping transport the Isra Noah. How could he do that? Zok Gemara, the Amarle Lemarvura Mekara. He wasn't there with them at the time, escorting them over the bridge. No, rather, he didn't own the bridge crossing, but he was very high up in the government. He was recognized as someone very important. So he would tell them, any of my guests, you let them travel for free. And they did it for him. Inami dinakiti bekitri, or he gave them some type of simon, some type of card, and he would tell in advance, he would tell the people by the bridge, anybody who comes with this get out of jail free card goes for free. So the kasha still remains. Lamaisi is doing something good for them. Lamaisi still, so he's not there at the time. But the Lamaisi, he's helping them. So how would that be mutter? So this is a kasha that's asked by, I believe it is somebody, I think it's an Achman who asked the kasha. So he says it over here. Let's focus over here. First of all, you're going to have to say that there was extra pay for the noides, because otherwise he's not being torich and isser, he's just paying their toll to help them. It must be that there's an extra charge for the noides, otherwise the Gemara is kasha, not a kasha at all. Then there's no schar of yain nesechi. Okay. V'yesh me'achayim shekosvu she'ein toisvis tashlim in maniach noides b'sfina. There were those achayim who learned that no, if you take these jugs on the bridge or on the ship that crosses the river, there would be no problem at all. When it's still not a problem. So since they're only coming to him to buy the yain esech and leaving with the yain esech, here it would be considered a problem that you're paying towards the transportation of the yain esech, even though you're only paying their toll, because they themselves would have only come if their toll were paid. It's the next stickle. He was a mamunah, he was an officer there, he was some type of supervisor. He didn't own the ships themselves. That's the Ritva, but that's Rashi. But Ritva Atzma Pirish and Ritva himself. So that's why it's not usher. It's not usher because he wasn't mated with them. He used his pull to get a third party to help them. And the Ritva writes, Mipnei of Ika, the Talmud Chacham. Since he was a great man, he was recognized as someone who's very respected. People who own the ships, they would do him anything he would ask for as a favor. So here he asks, even though he himself didn't help them cross the river, nevertheless, he's making money of the Ainesach based on the favor that he's doing. Part of the reason why they gave him those jugs that they normally would get to keep is because he's doing them this favor. So why is that not called having a no, a misra no? This is also that we've been learning, that if someone's working in Yain Nesach, he may not keep the schar. That's a knas chachamim. It's not etzem and isra no. It's a really a knas. Therefore, our Gemara makes sense. He physically wasn't matriach, didn't do any physical work to help them get over. That's what the people who operated the ferries, they did it. He just used his pull. For that, they wouldn't answer. He had to accompany these guys to the dock to tell them, give them a free ride. The Gemara is saying not actually at that time did he make the arrangement, so he was doing matriach right now for them. Rather, he made these arrangements long ago. And he told the people who operate the boats, please don't charge my custom. Sometimes, based on the respect that they had for the father, or even if they weren't carrying yain, they were doing it for the people. Therefore, it doesn't look like it's a tircha for the wine, and this type of tircha, the Rabbanon, the Chazal did not answer the wages based on that. Okay, gewaltig. Zogt the Mishnah weiter. Yayin nesach should nafel al gabi anov. You have a basket of grapes, and a whole bunch of yayin nesach spilled on the grapes. So does it mess them up? No. Yadichon. They have proper shells, proper peels that protect them. You rinse them off, and there's no absorption into the grapes with the yayin nesach, so there's no problem. Just wash them off. They mutars. However, if these grapes were split, now they're not protected. They don't have the membrane, the peel around them, so they're not surais because clearly they would have absorbed some taste of the wine. And what about nofel al gabi te'enim or al gabi tomorrow? What if yayin nesach fell on figs or dates? So those are absorbent. They're not sealed. They don't have a protective shell. Therefore, myesh ben benois and tam osir. If they are adding a nice taste, a wine tinge into the dates and figs, those dates and figs become osir. Umaisa bebisus ben zunan. There was a story of bisus ben zunan. Shehevi groigros besfina. He brought groigros or figs in a ship to transport them there, and some other person had yayin nesach. V'nishjaber chavish al yayin nesach. Someone's yayin nesach ruptured, the barrel ruptured. V'nafal al gabeim, and they soaked his produce. And now the question is now he lost his produce, it becomes osavano. V'sholach chachamim, he asked the chachamim v'tiru. Now the Gemara is going to ask, usually when the Mishnah brings a story, it's to illustrate the halacha we just said. But the halacha we just said was asurais. And here it says mutarais. So how does this story support the halacha that it's trying to support? Zakla, kolshu b'hanosai b'nois and tam osir. Whenever the taste that this iser is giving into the heter is a positive taste, it adds to it. If you taste that positive taste, then it will be osir. But if, yes, it absorbs the taste, but it's a foul taste, it doesn't add to the taste, then it's mutter, and that was the case of the yain nesach that fell on the dates in the ship. The reason why they were mutter, because it was actually not adding a good taste, it was adding a bad taste. If vinegar falls on certain types of beans, they're not going to answer them. Why? Because it doesn't add a good taste. It could be vinegar of yainesa. Yeah, the wine went bad. Yeah. Frank Gemara, Maisa Listar. I don't understand. The Mishnah brings a story that will contradict the halacha because the story said it was mutter and the Mishnah said it was aser. We're missing some stuff. If it's nois and tam lifgam, then it's mutter. And once you add those words in, now the story makes sense. Because they didn't add a good taste. There was a big pile of wheat. The nafal alei chavisa de yainesa, and the barrel of yainesa spilled on them, so they have the taste of yainesa on them. So you shouldn't be allowed to use them. Nevertheless, shoya Rava lizvuna loiv digachom. Rava said, "I allow you to sell this to you're not to eat it, but I'm not making it asabano. You can sell it to a guy." Esvei Rabba bar Levoy LaRava. So Rabba bar Levoy said, "How could you be mattering? Beget she'ovid boy klayim. What if you have a beget and you know there's a fiber of klayim in it, but you don't know where it is? Hareza loyim karenol. Loyim gachavim. You're not allowed to sell it even to a goy. V'lo yasanim urdas lachamor. You're not allowed to make it as a cover that goes over the chamor under the saddle. Avol oisin oisa tarchrichen l'meis mitzvah. But you are allowed to use it for tarchrichen for a meis mitzvah. So zok to Gemara, loyim gachavim my time alone. Why can't you sell it to a goy? A goy's allowed to wear shabbos. It must be because he might turn around and sell this beged to a yid, and now the yid will be over in Shabbos. Hachanami, so here too, how could you, Rava, allow these wheat kernels to be sold to a goy? It might be sold to a yid afterwards, and the yid will be nichshel. So Hadar, in fact, Rava was chayzer, and he said you cannot sell these kernels to a goy. But what you could do is you could grind them and make them into flour. And make them into bread. And you could sell the bread to a goy. Why shaloi b'fnei Yisrael? Because then a yid won't buy it from the goy. Because a yid will not buy pasakum. If a yid saw you sold it to the goy, he'll know you made the bread. So as long as he doesn't know you made the bread, then you could sell that because you could be rest assured a yid will not buy it. Tanan we learned so why Bechalal is there a problem with wine that fell on wheat kernels? They're complete, they're not cracked. Rinse them off, and they shouldn't be any different than the grapes in our Mishnah that you're allowed to use. Amar Papa, shiny chiti, hoyel ba'agav tzirayu, kemivu kois damya. Wheat kernels have a line in the middle that allows things to penetrate it. So wheat kernels in their natural state, even before they split, they are absorbive, and therefore, if wine spilled in them, you'd have a problem. Unlike grapes that were not yet popped, those grapes are protected from anything that would get absorbed into it. Now, the Gemara, the Tosfos gets into two very interesting shilos. The first question the Tosfos asks is, if one little fiber of shatnez got into a beged, why don't you say it's batal b'roif? We have the concept of bittul b'roif. So Zok Tosfos, a very, very interesting thing. Tosfos says that since the whole concept of klayim is only through a mixture, because that's what shatnez is. It's a mixture of wool and linen. Therefore, a mixture by shatnez is not batal. By every other isser, if it mixes into after the mixture is mabatale. But if the isser gufa is the mix, then it's not batal. For Tosfos, what do you mean by basar b'chalav? It's also the mix. Yet the halach is we say the chalav can be mevatel the basar, or the basar can be mevatel the chalav if you have more than 60. So Tosfos, that's a different story because it says derech bishul oslo Torah. The Torah says le'savashel gedi b'chalevim. Bishul always means that it's there to give a taste. So therefore, if it doesn't give a taste, it won't be osir. But shatnez, a mixture is osir, and therefore there's no bittul by shatnez. That's a chiddush. It's a very big chiddush. But that's why even one fiber of shatnez in the whole bag of the osir. Then Tosfos has a very interesting discussion You're allowed to dress a mace in kalayim. Is a mace allowed to wear kalayim? Right. There was also the shaila of the tzitzis. We pass on the tzitzis, but we put a talis on the mace. So Tosfos actually brings down two different approaches. There's a machlokes tanoim if we're going to be mechuyev in mitzvahs la'asad lavoi. If we are going to be mechuyev in mitzvahs la'asad lavoi, then you have to put tzitzis on the mace because he's going to get up lacher the geula and he's going to be there without tzitzis. It'll be a loig l'rosh. So that's one of the reasons why it would be also. So let's have a look. Who held you put the talis on the mace is a libid shmuel the azal tamei the isle ein mitzvahs betelos lasad lavoi. The mitzvahs will be around. If you don't give them tzitzis, when they end up standing up at Tchis HaMesim, you below tzitzis v'yesh kanavera. So therefore, you bury them with kosher tzitzis, so that by Tchis HaMesim they'll have their tzitzis. We don't do that, but there are others who hold.
Just make the tachrichim, Yosy. Just make the tachrichim without arba kanfis.
So I'm happy you brought that up. So I'm going to address that in a second. I keep looking at the make them exempt. For the same reason, our Gemara just said, if you have shatnez, you're allowed to use it as tachrichim umeis. He's going to stand up, it's going to be aser. Zok Tosfos, according to this shita, the hesped would be done in shatnez. But Avoda, you couldn't bury him in it because he's going to wake up wearing shatnez. Ulufizah chiluk, yeah. Nicha minagenu, our minig, she'anu masirna tzitzis mitalis ha'meisim. It makes sense that we take the tzitzis off. Why? Because we all like Rabbi Yochanan who argues with Rabbi, and he holds no, you don't have to worry la'asad lavoi because he holds that the mitzvahs will be mitalis la'asad lavoi. So there's no concern in getting them dressed in tzitzis. So now to address Akiva, Rabbeinu Yitzchak, you know what Rabbeinu Yitzchak would do? If the people were very zar in the mitzvah tzitzis, that was a hiri be mitzvah tzitzis kol yemeim. He's shy to have a lag. Someone who is very nizar in mitzvah tzitzis, such a person you should bury in kosher tzitzis because it'll be a slight for him if he's not wearing tzitzis. But nowadays, we're not so makbid nowadays on tzitzis. Adarabba, Iraminan, if you put him in tzitzis, have a lag. Loimar, Shekiyam v'loikiyam, right? You say, I'll put now become a tzaddik. He's dying now, so now he's a tzaddik. So for us, if we wore tzitzis, it would be a bizoyah. So that's what he said. Oh, so if even if you have yechidim that were makbid on tzitzis, most people aren't, and therefore you don't give anybody tzitzis. They used to only travel nidas meses, not regular, so the woman would be embarrassed. So nowadays we don't bury in tzitzis because most people aren't so makbid on tzitzis, and we wouldn't bury people who are very choshev in tzitzis because then it's a bizoyin for those that didn't. So there's a different minhagim. So Akiva over here, I think they put him in the talis, but they passed the talis, right? Okay, we shouldn't know from these things. Okay, everyone should have an awesome day. B'ez Hashem, we will learn tomorrow.
So the pitch at the funeral home is, they ask, so did your grandfather have a talis? And they go, yes, in fact, he has one. He's got one of those shawls. So the director then says, we have found that families like keeping the grandfather's old talis as an heirloom and a memento. Instead, we could sell you a brand new one for the deceased.